You don't see it coming, not at 40, not even at 55. But sometime after 60, a different kind of clarity settles in. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up quietly, almost unfairly sharp. People don't suddenly discover new regrets at that age. They begin to admit the ones they've been carrying for years. And if you spend enough time listening to people in their 60s, 70s and 80s, really listening, past the surface stories, you'll hear the same regret in different forms. They knew what mattered, and they didn't act in time. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't indifference. In fact, it was often the opposite. They were responsible. They were dependable. They were the ones who made sure everyone else was okay. The house functioned. The bills were paid. The children were provided for. That's how postponement disguises itself. It hides inside responsibility. I'll take care of my health later. I'll slow down once work eases up. I'll be more patient when things aren't so stressful. I'll reach out next week. I'll start that class after retirement. Later sounds harmless. It sounds practical. Sometimes it even sounds noble. Until you realize later isn't endless. I remember speaking with a man who had just retired. On paper, his life looked solid. Career intact. Family steady. No obvious crisis. In the middle of casual conversation, he said, "I thought my real life would begin when I finally had time. Now I have time, but I don't have the same body." He wasn't bitter. He was clear. His regret wasn't that he worked hard. It was that he assumed energy would be waiting for him when he was finally free to enjoy it. That's the part many people underestimate. Time doesn't just pass. It converts. It converts strength into memory. It converts opportunity into hindsight. When people talk about regret after 60, it rarely sounds dramatic. It sounds specific. Family comes up often. I was there, but I wasn't really present. I provided everything except attention. I corrected more than I encouraged. I assumed they knew I loved them. These aren't confessions of failure. They're acknowledgements of timing. Health follows closely behind. Not appearance. Not vanity. Just maintenance. I treated my body like it would always forgive me. I thought sleep didn't matter. I normalized stress. For decades, the body adapts. Then it stops adapting so easily. Stairs require thought. Sleep becomes inconsistent. Energy has limits. You begin organizing your life around recovery instead of expansion. That's why I'm careful when I hear people romanticize major lifestyle changes later in life. Moving somewhere remote for peace. Living next to a hospital for security. Peace is more than scenery. Peace is access. Peace is proximity to help. Peace is knowing that when something happens at 2 a.m. you aren't isolated. A friend once moved near a large hospital thinking it would bring reassurance. What he hadn't anticipated was the constant ambulance sirens. That sound is designed to trigger urgency. After months of it, your nervous system stays slightly elevated. Security feels different in practice than in theory. The wisest people I've seen don't chase the image of a life. They test it. They rent before buying. They stay for a season before committing. They notice winter darkness, summer maintenance, neighborhood rhythms. They pay attention to how communities respond to newcomers. Not because people are unkind, but because belonging takes time. Regret often comes from decisions made without full experience. And then there's caregiving, which humbles almost everyone who encounters it. Very few people plan for it. Most are pulled into it. A parent declines. A spouse becomes dependent. Love becomes physical labor. Lifting, bathing, monitoring medications, managing appointments, repeating routines. It is intimate and relentless. If you haven't lived it, it's easy to say you would handle it. The people who have handled it speak differently. They talk about exhaustion that sits in the bones. They talk about strained backs and sleepless nights. They talk about guilt for feeling overwhelmed. You can love someone completely and still not have the capacity to carry it alone. That's where resources matter, not for luxury, but for options, support, equipment, professional care. When options narrow, regret grows heavier because choices become limited. So when someone asks what most people regret after 60, the answer isn't poetic. They postponed what they already knew was important. That's the pattern. And here's where it becomes hopeful. Regret rarely begins at 60. It began earlier, at 50, at 55. The difference is that at 60, the window feels smaller. I should feels like movement, but it isn't. Thinking about change is not change. Planning endlessly is not progress. Action shifts direction. The most practical advice I've heard is almost unremarkable in its simplicity. Choose one action you can complete within 7 days. Not a reinvention. Not a dramatic conversation. Not a life overhaul. 1 week. 1 step. Schedule the appointment you've been delaying. Take 3 intentional walks. Call someone you miss. Say 1 honest sentence you've avoided. Review your finances. Explore care options before urgency forces you to. The goal isn't to rewrite your past. It's to prevent the same regret from returning at 70. Happiness after 60 isn't accidental. It tends to rest on 2 steady habits. The first is deliberate gratitude. What you lack appears automatically. Youth, speed, simplicity, they announce themselves. What you have requires attention. A roof, clean water, a body that still moves, a person who still answers your call, a morning you woke up to. Naming what you have stabilizes perspective. The second habit is movement. When anxiety or heaviness sets in, some people stay seated inside it. Others interrupt it. They walk. They step outside. They change rooms. They complete one small task. Physical movement often creates emotional movement. The same principle applies in relationships. Couples who remain steady don't eliminate disagreement. They protect their bond with language. They refuse to humiliate each other publicly. They don't build closeness through complaint. Repeated respect shapes direction over years. If there is one line worth holding on to, it's this. Regret after 60 isn't about not knowing. It's about delaying what you already knew mattered. So don't let this reflection become another postponed insight. Choose one action, complete it within a week. Let that small movement interrupt the pattern. And sincerely, thank you for being here. Time is the one resource none of us can replenish, and you chose to spend yours thoughtfully. If something resonated, consider sharing one thing you're no longer postponing. Sometimes clarity spreads quietly, and one small decision can shape the next decade.